Turn on the recording.
Yeah,
Easier,
I also made sure that I am not on mute, so they can hear me now.
Yes.
Should we give people a few minutes? Because I think we're supposed to have some um, people joining virtually, right?
Yeah, that's fine. I disabled their audio. I mean, in case I'll turn it on when there is a question answer session, not at the moment. So. You should use treatment.
Not yet. Let me just do that now. Should we get started? Just in the interest of time. Great. Good morning, everyone. Can everybody hear me? Great. So, hi, everyone, again. Most of you have probably seen myself, Valerie, and Kara over the last 2-3 days, but let us start with a brief round of introductions. My name is Shaig. I'm a solutions engineer at OpenAI. I'm covering education across Europe, the Middle East, and Africa, as well as Asia Pacific. So I work very closely with our education partners, which includes ministries, universities, and schools, to understand how they can best deploy OpenAI's products and get the most out of them for their faculty, students, and staff. With me today, I have Valerie and Kara.
Hello, everyone, and great to see many of you again, and some of you for the first time. My name is Valerie. I am the go-to-market lead for education, and what that means in practice is I get to help institutions and ministries think about what outcomes from an education perspective we can work on together. So a lot of creative thinking. We had a really fun day yesterday seeing some of that creativity from this institution, and we hope to see lots more of it today. And I work very closely with Kara.
And hi, everyone. Good morning. Thank you so much for being here. So excited to have you for our second round of the hackathon. Rounding out our customer education team, I'm based in London. I work with universities on deployment of ChatGPT, and a big part of that is just focusing on the practical application. How can you use ChatGPT in a way that helps improve your day-to-day, your workflow efficiencies, teaching, learning. And so a big part of that is just getting into ChatGPT and building that muscle. And so we're hoping that today's hackathon, you'll get to explore some new ideas, new concepts, and that you're able to walk away with something really exciting. So thank you all so much.
Turn them up. So before we get started, can I get a quick show of hands? How many of you were in yesterday's training and the hackathon? So the rest of you are new to the room, right? Great. So we're going to take it slow. And first, I'll give you sort of a very quick overview of what we're going to be doing today, right? So what I'm going to start with is explaining the concept of the hackathon. This training is a prerequisite to our hackathon later. So I want to cover that so you have a bit of an understanding on what we're going to be trying to get out of this training. After that, we'll focus on agents in education. I'll explain the concept of agents and how you can start thinking about agents in your workflows. You'll get a big break time to focus on other things, and then at 1 p.m., you're going to come back to this room, those of you who are participating in the hackathon, and we'll have 2 hours of building, and we'll spend the last half an hour of that session focusing on actually presenting what you've built, so you can also start sharing these ideas with your colleagues. So what is a hackathon? When we think about upskilling yourselves in ChatGPT, the best way to do it is getting hands-on, right? So this is learning how to build different solutions with ChatGPT for different kinds of workflows, whether that's coursework, advising, research, or operations. And these hackathons are usually focused on 3 key dimensions. We want them to be collaborative, so you can share ideas and you can work together in cross-functional groups most of the time to identify use cases that would benefit your department, the university, and the student body. We want them to be experimental. So some of you may already be familiar with ChatGPT. Some of you may be more advanced users of ChatGPT. But today's training and today's hackathon is really all about experimenting with different tools and trying new things out, right? And then last but not least, we want you to actually think about demoing these things, because that also drives you to better understand the edge cases of your workflows, as well as, again, make sure that the best practices, the learnings, and the applications that you uncover in today's session, you share with your colleagues, because that's going to be useful for them, and that's going to drive everybody's AI enablement to a whole new level. You don't have to be technical for today's training. In fact, most of ChatGPT is not technical. So don't worry if you don't know how to code. We're going to be walking through different low code and no code solutions that don't require you to code. Like I said, today's goal is all about pushing the boundaries of what's possible with ChatGPT. And whether you're in teaching, in research, or admin, we want you to focus on really understanding the product, exploring it, uncovering new use cases, experimenting, and most importantly, just having fun, right? This is going to be more of an informal training session, an informal hackathon. So don't be scared to try new things out. That being said, do make sure that you are focused on these 3 things: experimentation, AI literacy, and understanding how to safely apply AI in your workflow. And that's really important, because with ChatGPT EDU and with the workspace that you have at KFU PM, all of the data and all of the inputs and outputs that you have in ChatGPT are actually fully owned by KFU PM. We don't get access to that data. We don't train our models on that data. So it's very safe to use and it's scalable once you start thinking about how to deploy it across the whole campus. And obviously with that comes the compounding impact. When each and every one of you uses the tool separately,
Can you repeat the thing about
the safety.
campus-wide thing that you mentioned? It's available campus-wide?
Yeah, so you have a ChatGPT EDU workspace that is a dedicated workspace to KFUPM, right? So this is a workspace that is fully your university's workspace. All of the input and output data in that workspace is safe. We don't train our models on that data. It's secure. It's fully owned by you guys. And that's why it's safe to deploy when you start thinking about scaling AI across the campus.
Can we ask you a question during this?
I
prefer later.
I will pause for questions. We can discuss probably some of that before we actually dive into the agentic workflows. But with that said, sort of the compounding impact of being able to leverage ChatGPT and use it departmentally in your specific teams, maybe even in research functions, that supercharges your whole university's journey, right? When you're using it individually, you're sort of siloed. You may not be sharing these ideas and best practices with your colleagues, and you're not helping them upskill. And when we start thinking about sort of cultivating the culture of using this tool together, that's where you see the real impact. I said this is all about having fun. That being said, we do have obviously prizes and we want to celebrate your achievements. So at the end of the hackathon, for those who are partaking, we will ask you to submit your solutions to us. And then we will work with the leadership to identify 3 categories of winners, starting with the most innovative solution that doesn't have to be a technical solution. Sometimes innovation is very simple, yet very profound. The second category is most impactful for the university. So something that's maybe going to reshape the way that you teach. That's the entire concept of the next 2 weeks, teaching with AI. So you need to keep that in mind and start thinking of how you can redefine some of those teaching workflows. And the third one is Faculty's Choice Award. I said this a few times already, but we do want to share all of these use cases with you guys so you can also understand how your colleagues are using ChatGPT, and you will be able to select what you think is your most favorite solution, and we'll have a People's Choice Award. This is where I pause for questions.
I'll leave it at the end. Maybe you will cover it.
Great. Okay, let's move on to the agents. Actually, is everybody clear on the hackathon? Yeah.
How to submit agent?
Yeah, we'll share the form. So there will be a QR code. I am a bit more prepared today than I was yesterday. So it will be actually demoed on the screen so you can just always scan it and submit your solution. Great. So let's talk about agents, right? Why do we want to do this? When we launched ChatGPT in 2023, it was a groundbreaking moment. People could ask anything about any topic and get answers in real time across a wide range of tasks, whether that's teaching, whether that's learning, or anything else. That was profound, but now in 2025, we're thinking that something even more profound is going to emerge, and that's going to be the second ChatGPT moment. We want our solutions to go beyond just being a chat bot, and we want our solutions to be able to take actions on your behalf and solve problems on their own. And this moment is very, very important to our partners because ChatGPT becomes more of an academic and teaching coworker than just a tool that you leverage async, right? So we're building a set of new capabilities that are going to be helping you solve these problems independently. We have products, that's ChatGPT, that's our API, that are very easy to learn and use, and they have a very intuitive chat experience, and they're very multimodal with your text inputs, with your image inputs, audio inputs, code inputs, and so forth. So when you're using tools like Canvas, which some of you are maybe familiar with, we covered it in yesterday's training, you can condense hours or even in some cases days of work into just minutes. And that goes across academic content creation, data analysis, and even coding. We obviously want to make sure that whatever you do in ChatGPT is connected to your data so that ChatGPT can understand you and the work that you do much better. So with that, we have our connectors, we have a computer using capabilities within ChatGPT that allow it to navigate your academic tools, connect to those systems, and also power more impactful, more tailored responses and outcomes. Previously, with sort of the Canvas, with connectors and deep research, a lot of the focus was on helping with individual queries, but we're now also moving beyond that. We're building solutions that are going to be able to take a task and actually perform more end-to-end complex workflows on your behalf. And that's sort of the main value that we're seeing in the agents, is that it's going to increase the depth of the academic value that AI delivers. And by investing in these three areas, we're planning to make ChatGPT quick and easy to adopt, and also personalized to your unique academic context. So I mentioned agents a lot. What defines an agent? Let's just start there. Let's level set. How many of you are familiar with the concept of agents? I'm going to try and break it down in very, very simple language, because it's a bit of a buzzword recently and you hear it a lot, especially across academic and enterprise context. But when you think about sort of, and let me change my mic. When you think about, yeah, much better. When you think about conventional software, it's meant to help you streamline and automate some of the tasks, right? But agents, on the other hand, are meant to perform these tasks independently, right? So if you think of a workflow, you think of it as sort of a sequence of steps that is required to complete a task, like maybe retrieve an academic context from some of your systems, onboarding a new faculty member, creating a spreadsheet, building a slide deck, and even writing a report, right? So you think about the things that you do on a daily basis that get you from point A to point B to achieve an outcome, and you want to build an agent that is able to do that autonomously. For you to be able to build an agent that is reliable and consistent, you need to think of it as having four sort of dimensions. Instructions that are going to guide its behavior, a set of tools that are going to give it access to specific systems to be able to perform the task for you, knowledge set, which is the context that you want it to have to be able to perform the task to a high quality, and also a set of guardrails, which is rules and checks and measures so that it can validate that whatever it's doing is right and it's not going sort of on a tangent and doing things that are not relevant to your specific workflow. Any questions on this? Because I know this may be a very, very new.
What is the difference between tools and guardian?
Yeah, tools is, let's say, if you're telling me go and teach my class, about mechanical engineering, the tool that you would give me is probably like a textbook, some of the academic context, which is the tools of knowledge, right? As well as maybe like a path to get into the classroom. Guardrail is what I shouldn't be doing, right? So you'll say, okay, teach them mechanical engineering, but don't touch on topics that are not relevant to the course. Make sure that you don't talk about astrophysics, stuff like that, which is more of a what not to do, so I can make sure that I'm staying on the right path.
So this GPT is basically agent is a subset of GPT, or is GPT itself an agent?
Yeah, so we're going to go into that in the next slide, but agent is a tool that you have in ChatGPT. We call it ChatGPT agent.
I'm assuming that you might have multiple agents or multiple tasks and even with multiple layers. Okay, maybe someone will take care of the task, he did the work appropriately, and then I will get a final result. So I can have this is structure in ChatGPT.
Yeah, so we'll cover that as well, and I'll actually also do a demo. So we'll break it down to understand how you can employ agent.
How you can interact with other softwares? For example, I'm working, say, on MATLAB,
Yeah.
simulation or something. How would be able to connect to them and, for example, ask them, give them the correct specification about my problems, build up for me, give me the result or whatever. How would be able to do that?
It's a great segue to how do we actually make sure that agent can take steps on your behalf. So you can think of an agent as sort of an assistant, right? They can pull this live context from your systems, they can execute tasks and return outputs in multiple different formats, right? Of course, for it to be able to do that, it needs to have a range of tools. First of all, it can use connectors to connect to some of the systems that are already natively supported in ChatGPT. So if you wanted to maybe check your emails or look at the SharePoint where you have a lot of academic context, it can do that via connectors. It also has a computer using capability. So that's using a text-based browser and a virtual browser that it can go and do tasks for you in different web pages and in different systems. And it just uses sort of a virtual browser to access that. And you'll see in my demo later, you can also actually see what it's doing in real time. So it can navigate websites, it can filter results, it can run code using the terminal, and then you can also conduct analysis, use Python to build spreadsheets, use Python to build slide decks, and so on and so forth. So it's leveraging all of these tools to carry out these complex tasks. And obviously, when we think about extending that across your system, again, breaking it down into tools and context, these tools can be defined as web search, computer use, retrieval or connectors, and code interpreter, which is how it builds slides and spreadsheets. And we're looking at ways that we can now integrate this with your LMS, with your student systems, more deeply with your academic knowledge, as well as your email, so you can also get that context that is very personal to you.
It's only limited, for example, how many files, for example, you can give. Because sometimes I did one time, I give them 16 files, they said no 10 maximum.
Yeah.
Any limitation for that? For example, if I have several things to integrate them together and suddenly said, oh, you are out of the range. What we should do in this case?
Yeah, so ChatGPT has some limitations on the files that you can upload. And this is what you can put in your conversation window. When you use tools like connectors or web search, you bypass that limitation. So the way that connectors work is you don't hit the size limit. So if you connect it to your, let's use an example of SharePoint, which has all of your department's files, it can query those files without restrictions on how many. The limit there is like the context window. So a large language model works with context, right? So it can analyze vast amounts of text. And sometimes when there's just too much text, obviously it's going to start missing some of the nuance of the text. And this is what causes what we call hallucinations. But for most of you, like that context window is very, very big. So you shouldn't worry about sort of hitting that limit. If we're talking specifically about the number of files, yeah, I'd recommend using connectors, and I'll show you how to do that as well.
For code interpreter, like if I have, say, multiple vision languages, so I want to run, and then the maybe code I provided. So now, each element will run each of the vision language, and then I assume that okay, then maybe another element interact with them. So here, do you work like that, or maybe the code he will generate itself?
Yeah, so I'll do a demo and we'll cover best practices. It usually does the code itself. So let's say if I'll ask it to build a spreadsheet, the way that it builds that spreadsheet is through the terminal and coding, right? So it has the reasoning capability to build code. But if you wanted to do something very specific in a very specific manner, you can also give it a snippet of code and then ask it to perform the task in that specific way.
Maybe so it has dependency. So it's not like.
Oh yeah, so typically it works through that. Again, it has reasoning capabilities, right? So whenever it hits a blocker, it's going to try and take a different approach to completing the task. Sorry, can you repeat that?
And use it in Linux, doing shell scripting and doing integration and the shell script.
I think you should be able to, yes. What is there any specific use case there that you have in mind?
Yeah, just running multiple simulations and analyzing them and DMX.
Yeah, so I think it should be able to if you give it the right tools and the right access to the systems, right? Sometimes I actually use agent to do tasks for me in ChatGPT, which is like I ask ChatGPT agent to go to ChatGPT and maybe run the same prompt like 20 different times, or run codex 20 different times, which is our coding agent. Build like pick the right coding output and output that for me and then explain why it's the best output. So you can definitely do a lot of different things with it. I'd be curious to see how you experiment with that and let me know if you get to the right outcome. But how does it work, right? We talked about tools, we talked about connectors, but let me maybe map it out for you so you can have a better understanding of what it uses and for what, right? So we give ChatGPT different avenues for accessing and interacting with different kinds of information, right? And the main point here is that you don't have to tell it what to use most of the time. It can choose the optimal path to most effectively perform the task that it's given. For instance, if you're asking it to sort of go on your shared drive, it will try and use connectors for that. If you're asking it to run a PhD level research or analysis, it will use its search and deep research capabilities. If you ask it to log into some of the databases that it doesn't natively have access to through connectors, and will use its computer using capabilities. And then it will also deploy its coding toolkit to build spreadsheets, slides, and charts for output. So again, all of this is done using its own virtual computer, and ChatGPT agent preserves context necessary for the task, even when you're using multiple tools. Questions on this?
Yes, please.
Yeah.
So for the deep research, this is, as far as I know, this is a separate tool.
Yeah.
Right? So if we are to choose the agents tool, how can it be connected to the deep research?
So I'm going to go back to this slide quickly. So the whole point of the agent is that it can actually use all of these different capabilities within ChatGPT, right? So it can use deep research if you ask it to build a very extensive deep research report. It can use connectors, it can use the computer that it virtually has, it can use code interpreter, image generation. A lot of the times when I ask it to create slides for me, and we're gonna see it in the demo, it actually uses our image generation capabilities, creates those images, and then puts them on the slide. So agent has access to this wide range of tools, and it can call them independently to complete the tasks.
Another question for the connectors. Is it only one connector? Because I tried it. I'm able only to select one of the connectors.
Yeah, so connectors are usually configured on workspace level. So maybe we need to look into that later. But typically, and maybe actually this is a great point. Let's jump into the demo here, and then hopefully you'll get a better understanding. I'm gonna share this tab. Great. By the way, maybe for this section, you guys can follow me. We will have a quick refresher just before the hackathon, but I want you to be able to navigate the workspace and call agent as well. So this is just your general ChatGPT window, right? This is what you should see when you access your workspace. And just to be sure, you can see that I'm in the EDU demo workspace. So this is what I use for my demo purposes. You should see your KFU PM workspace throughout today when you're doing this training and the hackathon, right? So whenever you log in, first and foremost, just make sure that you're in the right workspace because your workspace now has the agent mode enabled. Next thing, how do we actually call our agent? So the way that I usually do it, and it's not captured in the left-hand side, you know, usually you have your GPTs and codecs and everything there, but agent is actually called through the toolkit. So if you click here, you'll see that I have my agent mode right underneath the tools, right? So whenever you click that, you see that now it changes the UI for me, and I can see that I'm now using agent. And immediately, going back to the question about connectors, you'll see that there's a sources configuration that I can also choose and then select what connectors I want to leverage in my task. So right now it's web search. I can toggle on SharePoint if I wanted to have access to SharePoint. And I can also just connect a wide range of other tools, whether that's my Google Calendar, Teams Calendar, email inboxes, Canva, Dropbox, and whatever.
Can be connected to the Blackboard.
So currently not natively, but Blackboard you can use through the computer using capability, and I'll show you how it does that. So obviously we have a set of connectors that are native. Not all connectors are going to be what you use in your daily life. And like I said, whenever it has a specific connector, agent will pull from that connector. So if you tell it, hey, use SharePoint, it's not going to try and log into SharePoint using its computer using capability. It's going to use the connector as long as it's toggled on. So make sure that you toggle on and off all the connectors that you need. Great. We have our suggested prompts here. I'm actually going to use a different prompt because we're at KFUPM. And I'm going to break this down, right? So we covered a little bit different sets of capabilities and tasks that it can do. I'm giving it a bit of context. We are KFUPM, and we're launching a project to evaluate and optimize carbon capture and storage systems for industrial facilities in Saudi Arabia and the GCC. You'll see here that my first sort of prompt here is run a deep research review of the latest CCS technologies and deployment strategies. So I tell it to do deep research for me, and ultimately, going back to somebody's question from the audience, it will produce a deep research report. Now, the main difference with this deep research and the deep research that you call also as a tool is that this is going to be still pretty extensive, but it will take less time on this deep research just so that it can complete the whole tasks without taking hours up. My second task here is to identify 15 CCS project sites in Saudi Arabia and the GCC and compile them into a spreadsheet. So now I'm asking you to build an output for me, which is going to be a spreadsheet, right? And I'm giving it a specific structure for what I actually want that spreadsheet to have. And then finally, I'm also asking it to prepare a slide deck overview summarizing these key findings, site comparisons, recommendations, and providing a clear roadmap with next steps and timeline. So this is pretty big, right? It's an extensive prompt. And usually maybe when you work with ChatGPT, your first instinct is to break this down into smaller prompts. The beauty of the agent is that you can actually give it this task and then run it, go do your other work while it's doing the task for you, and then come back to it and see how it's progressing.
Yeah, usually what I do, like this kind of work, I give a rough idea to ChatGPT. Okay, that's what I want to do. Yeah. And I said, okay, make a detailed instruction. Okay, which will help in developing the agent.
Yeah. So you can also use ChatGPT to help you refine this prompt and understand how to best structure it. But typically, and then we're going to cover this later, since you're new to the agent, start simpler, right? And then build up from there. So let's say I'm going to hit send here. First thing that it does, it tells me, hey, agent mode is using connectors, right? Choose connectors with care, use only the connectors that are needed for a task to help reduce some of the risks, because obviously you are using agent to do tasks autonomously. So there are risks involved, which we're going to cover as well. So let's say if I don't want it to be able to access SharePoint, just because, it's not really relevant to my task, right? I'm asking you to do something that it doesn't need access to SharePoint for. I'm going to remove that and then hit send. You'll see here, it starts setting up the desktop. So this is what I was mentioning earlier. It's creating that virtual desktop that it's going to start using. And then you're going to see that I can actually now track what it does there. And it does take a little bit of time. So usually a task like this would probably take about half an hour to run. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to this prompt here, which is the exact same prompt that I ran earlier today, right before the training. And we'll see the output for this. So you see here that it worked for 31 minutes. So it does take a bit of time to complete this task because it's doing a lot of things and building a very comprehensive thing for you. And you see that there's this UI screen, which is pretty cool, that I can actually look at while it's doing the task and also after the task has been completed to understand what it actually is doing and how it's going about doing these different things. And you can see it's giving me its chain of reasoning. So it's looking at the IEA.org website to read about the CCS. It's like going to read this for a little while, move to a different website, then again another one, go through a bunch of websites, opens a Boston Consulting Group article, and then you'll see here that now it starts preparing the data frame to build the spreadsheets and the slides. So here it's using the image generation model to build one of the images for the slides, which is always really funny to me. It's like, oh, let me just build these images. And then it applies sort of patches. Like I said, it's building through code. So it's using a terminal and then making changes to the terminal. Somebody actually had a question about like, what if it can't do something? The great thing about sort of having reasoning capabilities is that you'll see here that it's applying like patches because there's something that went wrong in the task. So it says, okay, well, how can I resolve this so I can get to the output? And it starts working through different ways of solutioning there. I'm going to zoom out. You'll see here that if we decide to look at the desktop view, that's great. You can also actually switch to what we call activity view, which is your standard chain of reasoning, and you'll see that it's very long. So it covers the whole 30 minutes, and you can see what kind of reasoning it took, what different steps it took to complete the task. You can see the code that it's writing. You can see the website that it's looking at. It's very extensive, and obviously this gives you a lot of transparency into what it's doing, which is really important, right? If we want something to be working autonomously, sometimes I want to understand how it got to the solution. And then let's look at the outputs here. First and foremost, the deep research output that I asked for, and it's very extensive. Again, it covers CCS technologies. It goes into sort of building tables. It has citations in line, which I can also look at if I need to. So for those of you who have worked with deep research, this may look familiar. And you can also export this now in Word or PDF if you need to use it downstream. Right. And then build the spreadsheet for me, and I can actually preview this in ChatGPT. But you can see that it now covers the different sites for these CCS technologies, the country, the type, some of the metrics that I asked for, as well as included links. So we went from deep research to a spreadsheet, and we're concluding now with also a slide deck, right? So it's building the slide deck for me, sort of summarizing the project objectives, giving me a little bit of context, doing a suitability analysis for me, and then you'll see the image that we saw earlier in the desktop view, and then the spreadsheet, the charts that it has here and the tables. This is not rendering correctly in the UI, but if you download this, and you can download this as a PowerPoint, actually, and then change it in PowerPoint if you need to make edits, you'll see that it actually shows correctly. This is just a UI bug here, but it's pretty extensive, right? And it captures everything that I needed it to capture. Building slides is a new capability. Give me one second. Building slides is a new capability. We had a lot of demand for ChatGPT being able to build slides. So that's what Agent tackles. So just to wrap up, you see that it gave me 3 different outputs. It took 30 minutes to complete the task. And now in the same way that I would normally do with chat, maybe I can start going deeper into some of this analysis, right? I can also ask you to do other things for me as a follow-up. I'm gonna pause. Questions? Let's start here.
Can we have an Excel sheet formatted with the specific columns, and they explain what are these columns, and they upload it to the ChatGPT agent to fill in the missing parts? We do, for example, benchmarking for top programs when we develop a new program, academic programs, or we enhanced it. So can we automate this using the ChatGPT agent?
Absolutely. So the question is, can I provide it sort of a file or a template or anything that needs to be completed and ask it to complete that file? That's honestly like best practice, I'd say. So if I'm building something very specific, let's say a spreadsheet, I will give it a template of that spreadsheet, right? Or I will like populate one row and then say, now populate the rest in the same way. The same applies to building a slide deck. If you give it a template, it does a much better job of actually producing the output that you need. Because otherwise it's going to take the creative freedom to do things, and you don't necessarily always want that. But you can also ask it to complete things for you. Yeah. So if you have something that is, half complete or has missing information and you need it to do search and deep research and complete it, definitely do that.
Questions. First of all, how can I reduce the hallucination? How can I reduce the hallucination that probably could come from ChatGPT? I know 5 has less hallucination than 4, but still there are. I mean, should I go ahead and fact check all the documents? That's the first question. Second question: should I wait 30 minutes in order to see the final results? Can I break it down into, for example, after 3 minutes, at least I see it's doing what I wanted to do?
So, great question. So the first question is, how can I reduce hallucinations? And hallucinations is basically the model giving you information that's not correct, whether it's made up, whether it's completely incorrect and it's using a different figure, or information that is like outdated. Usually through guardrails, right? My best practice is whenever I give an agent a task, one of the last steps for me will be make sure that you check everything once you're done and identify maybe some information that may be incorrect and fix it before you give me the output. So including that step for like self-criticism or self-reflection usually does wonders. But yeah, we have reduced hallucination rates with GPT-5. That being said, they are still possible. So there's different ways to tackling it. I mentioned including self-criticism in the prompt. Another thing that I do is if I'm using, and this is probably going to be applicable to you, I'm using specific academic papers or lecture notes or whatever to produce, chat outputs. I tell it, do not use any other information apart from what I've given you, or what you have access to in this folder or through this connector. So that way it's sort of limiting itself, again, with the creative thinking, and only sticks to the information that it has. Another way also to do that is you always just tell it, if you don't know something, tell me, don't make things up. So again, goes back to just working with chat and telling it, hey, like, chill out a little bit. don't give me things that are not factual.
Break it out the output.
Yeah.
No, breaking out the output.
Oh yeah, right. The second question was about simplifying things. Yeah, exactly. So obviously I give it a very a long task, you may want to make it simple as a starter so you can test and iterate. What I also do is take the same task, right? So if I gave this task to it, I will copy it, start a new window, and then maybe make a few changes to it just to see maybe how I can instruct it better, and then run it again in parallel. So you don't have to run one task at a time. You can run many different tasks at once. And then when you come back like 10 minutes later or 15 minutes later, you're gonna have 10 or 15 different versions of the same task that you can then look at the prompt and see, okay, it did a much better job with this prompt. Let me use that. And then you understand both how the agent works, and you also get sort of a range of outputs that you can choose from. Not with agent. So this is in beta. Okay, actually, this is great because I'm going to jump back to my slide deck. And then we're going to touch on that in just a second. But obviously, I just gave it a very specific task. But let's think about what else you could use it for in your faculty, in your research or admin workflows, right? So these are in columns, and these are just some of the sample use cases that you can think of in education. Let's cover them one by one. First one is course material preparation, right? So maybe you want agent to scan your learning management systems and connect them to your shared drives to get some of the lecture materials, run a search and deep research on them, understand what's maybe missing, what's not aligned with your curriculum, what is outdated, and then give you a summary of what you need to update, right? So that makes it a lot easier to keep your materials and whatever you use in your research or teaching relevant and contemporary. You can also use it for student feedback analysis, right? Every maybe semester, every year, you get your course evaluation data from different survey tools. So why don't you just pull that using Agent, ask it to run some of the sentiment analysis or keyword analysis, identify gaps in your teaching, and then generate slides with findings and a teaching plan so you can start improving both your outcomes and your students' cognitive outcomes. When you're in research, obviously the number one use case everybody thinks of is literature review. So you can automate that with Agent, connect it to, I use Scopus and Web of Science here because those are the ones that I've come across, but connect it to your academic research libraries, and then ask it to run a monthly or maybe quarterly analysis, extract some of the relevant information for you, and then produce a summary, whether that's a spreadsheet or a slide deck. You can also do grant proposal drafting. So if you're looking at, drafting proposals, if you want to understand what other universities are focusing on, what are the research topics that are emerging, you can also automate some of that. As an admin, you have a lot of tasks that are very repeatable, right? So those are the kinds of tasks that you want to delegate to agent, whether that's maybe student or onboarding. You have, hundreds of students joining you every year. Maybe you can gather that new data from your drives and then create a database of accounts and then draft personalized welcome emails to these students so that you can make their start at KFU PM a lot more enjoyable and streamlined. And you can also do some different, admin tasks like conference travel coordination. This I've seen done many, many times, but you can use Agent to identify sort of what's happening in the region or globally, build your spreadsheet in the same way that it did for me with all the different sites, and include relevant information maybe about like date and time of the conference, travel, tickets, like what flights I could take, what hotels I could stay at, and then also sort of you can then use it to send out to your faculty and make sure that they have the latest information and are best prepared to attend these things. This is just use cases that I've seen done that I think are great ways of starting to think about agent, but obviously I'm super excited to see what you're going to be doing today. and how you should be thinking about this. We had a question just now about hitting limits with Agent. Agent is still in its early stages, right? And it's currently in beta on your EDU platform. So what that means actually is that we don't think of it as having specific set of limits. You can use it many different times just because it is in beta preview, so we're not like charging for it or anything, so to speak. And it's capable of doing all of these different tasks, but obviously because it's still in beta, there may be some risks, right? So how do we make sure that it is best prepared to not make some mistakes? When we're talking about giving tasks to an autonomous agent, the number one concern is, okay, I'm not in control, right? I don't know what it's doing, but you actually are in control. And we at OpenAI have invested a lot of time. By the way, I see a lot of people taking pictures. We have shared the deck with the leadership, so you will get a copy of this as well. So we've strengthened some of the controls from our sort of preview, and we're constantly adding safeguards and mitigations around some of the agent mistakes, especially because, like I said, this agent can perform tasks that impact the real world, right? So first and foremost, it requires explicit user confirmation for some of the actions, like making a purchase, sending an email, completing some forms for you. It will ask you to confirm before it hits send or complete. It gives you, again, active supervision tools. So in watch mode, what I demoed earlier, where you can see that little desktop of what the agent is doing. Again, certain critical tasks will require oversight, and actually ChatGPT will actively refuse to perform high-risk tasks because of the guardrails that we've implemented around risk mitigation. So if you ask it to complete bank transfers, it won't do that for you. And you can think, obviously, of many other high-risk tasks that are around the same level. The browser gives you the ability to watch what agent is doing, but you can also actually interrupt agent and control agent and take over the agent. So let me go back to my tab here. So we see here that it's still running that search that I gave it just before. And if I wanted to take over the browser, I could actually do that, right? So this gives you, again, some of the controls that we've implemented here. ChatGPT won't take screenshots, so only you can see the info that you're entering when you take over the browser. So let's say if you're inputting your password and your credentials to access your learning management system, that's not saved anywhere. That's just you doing your thing, and then ChatGPT won't have any context of that. And if I click this, you'll see that it actually spins that browser and it zooms in. Okay, retry. And we'll give you ability to sort of, let me try again. And we'll give you ability to interrupt the browser here. Well, it should give you the ability. Let's see. Oh yeah, great. So you can see here now I'm in the website that it was last accessing to do the research for me. And I can now scroll this website. I can create sort of a new tab and do different things with it, and then guide the agent proactively to complete the steps in the right manner. Or if it's doing something that you're like, okay, this is not relevant to what I asked it to do, you can just stop it and then go to the right web page, to the right system, and then finish controlling this. And you see that it then continues from where you finished. Great, let's move back to this. Any questions on this so far? Yeah.
Possible not see the whole log of all the websites or all the processes?
Yeah, so you can actually see that. So let me go back here. If I go to this, at the end, it gives you a bunch of sources that it's using. So you can track these, and they're cited here at the bottom. So if it's doing research for you, deep search, it also cites them in line, right? So you'll see here that it actually puts those inline citations. Yes.
First of all, the agent in the Plus and Pro subscriptions, and the data also.
Yeah, so agent fully is in beta. It's sort of like we're still gathering a lot of feedback around how to make it as useful as possible, especially for the EGU context and consumer context as well, right? So we've released a lot of different tools, and we're constantly thinking of like ways to navigate some of the risks of agents, right? It's a hot new topic, but obviously our first and foremost priority is making sure that this is safe to use. So we are still gathering a lot of feedback. Sorry, do you mind? Yeah, we have 4 minutes. You can ask me questions after, but I'm actually at my time, so this is great. I did a lot of sort of, we covered a lot of ground there, and a lot of you are going to come back to the hackathon and deploy agent. Some of you may not come to the hackathon, but I do want you to try this out in your workflows now. And a few simple things and best practices before you start building with agent. And some of you touched upon these with your questions. Keep things simple, right? Start with what we call a happy path scenario, so you can focus on getting the basics right before you move on to more complex and scalable tasks. So limit the scope for your first task. Maybe instead of asking agent to look at 1,000 different papers, ask you to look at 10 papers. So you can quickly check your outputs, number one. I think someone did mention that same purpose. But you can also understand how to scale this properly, right? You're going to be doing a lot of prompt changes as you work with agent to help it best complete these tasks. So starting simple and keeping things small is a good way to get started. When you think about all the different workflows that you have, try and map them out and break them down into step by step. For us who do this on a daily basis, it's very easy to be like, okay, well, agent should know how to do this, right? It's not that hard. But breaking things and actually spelling things out step by step is really, really helpful, because then it can also help you understand some of the edge cases that the agent may be hitting. So you can also include those in your prompt as guardrails and mitigations. We touched upon this, you actually touched upon this, examples of the final format. That's always useful because then agent can adhere to your style and structure preferences. And going back to the topic of guardrails, make sure to tell agent what not to do. So we give it a specific set of instructions, but sometimes it can take the creative freedom because it's trying to be as helpful as possible. But if you don't need specific information, just tell it not to include that, right? So if you wanted to only use data from your LMS and not search the web, first of all, disable the connector. Second of all, tell it explicitly not to do that. Going back to the topic of connectors, do name your tools in your prompt as you get started, just because it's easier for you to navigate what these tools are and understand what they are used for. But it's also easier for the agent to then understand what tools to deploy for different tasks. And then whenever you give it these tools, check that it does have them available. Let's say if you're asking it to use a SharePoint connector, but you didn't toggle it on, it's going to hit that sort of block, and it's going to come back to you and say, hey, I can't pull this information. And obviously, whenever you give it directions to use systems that require you to log in, you will need to either take over the browser, or in many cases, and sometimes I do this, I give it sort of my password and I'm like, okay, use these credentials when you're accessing like specific tools. Obviously, that's like not, many of you may not want to do that. So just take over the browser, log into the right system whenever it's in that website, and then let it continue its work. Talking about taking over the browser, do embed human checkpoints. So for critical actions, do ask it to require explicit confirmation. I mentioned that it's already prompted to do that, but if you want that extra level of security, include that in your instructions. And like I said, you can run several prompts at once as you get started to understand what works best. So do also take that into consideration. Great, that's it. We're right on time. So you can ask me questions. If you send me emails, I may not. I may lose sort of track of them because I feel like there's going to be a lot. But I have half an hour, 10, 15 minutes now.
No, we have to.
Oh, we have to go, right. Never mind. Come back for the hackathon.
We'll see you inshallah in the hackathon at 1 o'clock. So it will be also here. Also the recording of the 2-day session and also yesterday's session for the training, it will be shared with you